A very good morning to all of you. I wish this is a presentation which I am making on a very familiar topic, soil plant water relations. But I am trying to do this in a slightly different conceptual manner. Whenever we talk about water in soil or water in plant, basically the content of water is what we usually measure and we usually report, and we think about that, the physical content of water. But over the years, actually the plant water relations and soil plant water relations also, there is a lot of conceptual change. And in fact, I happen to be a person who is very closely associated with this, because my doctorate is based on this new concept on crop water relations. So now I will be presenting here to all of you, and I want more engineers to participate in this webinar along with Agronomist, because this concept, if everybody understands well, our outlook on micro irrigation itself can be modified. Most of the work which has been carried out in Jain Irrigation, at least after I joined, was based on the new concept of soil plant water relations, and we call it as the thermodynamic concept. This concept importance is that it can very easily explain the continuity of water from the soil to the plant and to the atmosphere, the three phases where the water relations connect living plant with the soil and atmosphere. With that introduction, let us get into some of the very specific details. And finally, we will come to know, once I complete this webinar, you will come to know what the thermodynamic concept, in what way it helps in the understanding of crop water relations. Okay, let's first talk about drip irrigation, because that is the topic we are all very familiar with. Micro irrigation or a drip method of irrigation is introduced to increase water productivity of crops. This is done by, or this water productivity is achieved in two ways. One, increasing the crop productivity per se, and two, reducing its water consumption to produce that particular yield or productivity. So both are added to, you get water productivity hike or increase. Obviously, in drip irrigation, you all know that water is applied directly to the root zone through the emitters, and it is applied at frequent intervals in controlled quantities, and these quantities are decided as per the requirement of the plant at that time, or the age of the plant and the time of the year. And drip irrigation is the most advanced method available as of now, and it gives you highest water application efficiency. There's nothing new what I said. I only try to bring in the new concept with the existing knowledge together. Now, why this is important, that is, the drip method of irrigation is critical, or irrigating to the extent only of crop water requirement is important. And one of the most beautiful data so far, if you look at the literature, is this particular slide or the graph I am showing from study done in the USA, something around 2000-2001. Here you have what you are looking at is actually the yield of potato crop plotted at various irrigation levels, and these irrigation levels are decided or determined based on the evapotranspiration. So you have 0 to 5% of evapotranspiration, that is, you are giving irrigation equivalent to the evapotranspiration or 5% more. What happens is that you get the highest yield at that time. So when the amount of irrigation applied is equivalent to the evapotranspiration of the potato crop at that particular location, you will get highest yield. But if you look at the left side of the figure, where we have reduced the application of water lesser than the evapotranspiration, 5% less, 10% less, and more than 10% less, which means we are inducing water stress or drying in the soil and water stress in the crop, which obviously will reduce the yield. This is not anything new. Everyone understands that if appropriate irrigation is not given to satisfy the water need of the crop, you will induce water stress in the crop, and water stress will result in yield reduction. That's what the left side shows. But most important part of this slide or this study is on the right hand side of the diagram, where you are increasing the irrigation by 5 to 10% of the evapotranspiration, and then more than 10%. There also you will see reduction in yield. In fact, the reduction is more when 5 to 10% excess water is given than when 5% lesser water to evapotranspiration is given. In other words, excess water results in a higher productivity reduction than a insufficient evapotranspiration level irrigation. But the best thing is match the irrigation to the evapotranspiration, and that is possible with the drip irrigation system. That is why drip irrigation is important, and I have been using this graph probably for the last 18 years or so in all these forums to make people understand what is happening when you do drip irrigation properly with the estimated evapotranspiration and schedule the irrigation according to the changing evapotranspiration along the crop duration period. After understanding that, let's go into the soil plant water relations. The soil plant water relationship treats those physical properties of soils and plants that will affect the movement, retention, and use of water. That's the best way to define it. The movement of water, the retention of water in either in soil or in the plant or in the leaf or in the atmosphere, and also use of water by the crop. So it's very important to know the soil plant water relations. We can also call it soil crop water relations, because when a community of plants are grown, it becomes a crop. These factors must be considered in designing and operating conservation irrigation system like drip irrigation system. It's important. An engineer is concerned primarily with the water holding capacity of the soil. Most people even now thinks the important thing is the water holding capacity of the soil. It is, particularly in the plant root zone, that decides the frequency of irrigation. The frequency of the it also decides the survival of the crop if there is no second irrigation or no possibility of second irrigation. Then the second thing is looking at is the water intake rate of the soil. When you are irrigating, you are applying water to the soil, there is an intake rate. All soils are not taking the water in the same rate. And then there is the next point, the root system of the crop. You can have a crop having much robust root system which can exhaust a large volume of soil, or a thinner and more modest root system which can exhaust only a limited volume of the soil. This varies from crop to crop, and also it varies from age to age of the crop. It also varies with the health of the crop, and of course, and the amount of water that crop uses. That is very important for the engineer to understand. he probably is not looking at any of these. He will ask what is the peak water requirement when he's done, because his system can be designed for a particular flow which will satisfy the peak water requirement of the crop. The rest can be adjusted by opening and closing the valve, that is the timing the irrigation. The time becomes a important factor there. So here the management comes in. So a well-designed drip irrigation system also can be misused if the management factor is of low quality or the management is done poorly. But the engineer must also have a working knowledge of the soil plant water relationship in order to plan efficient irrigation for particular crops grown on a particular soil and to adjust the design to various conditions. This general knowledge also enables him to assist an irrigator in managing the system efficiently. That's the second part of it. The system operator can manage the system efficiently if he also knows about what is happening in the system. Here the system is not the drip system, the overall system of the soil, crop, water and atmosphere system. Now let us get into some very specific points. Just for clarity, I am repeating, this is whatever I am going to say now is actually known to everybody, each of you, and it's not a testing of your knowledge. It is just to reiterating some very basic facts. We use two things. We use soil texture when we talk about and soil structure. There's a big difference between these two. Texture is actually the size distribution of individual particles. What proportion sand is there, silt is there, clay is there in a soil. That is what texture is. While structure is arrangement of the particles into larger units. Whether it is sand, silt, clay, all the particles forms aggregates or clods, crusts, and sometimes very compressed hard pans. That decides the structure. That's the structure. Now, in this case, in our description as well as discussion today, texture takes a more active role. Now, the soil texture and moisture distribution. Let us see. Let us start with the sand. This is the builder's sand, which has got a particle size 2 to 4.75 millimeter. That is a range, 2 millimeter to 4.75. Coarse sand and 0.0425 to 2 medium sand and 0.075 to 425 fine sand. Sand particles, because of this, they have a wide range of sizes. Actually, 0.075 millimeter to 4.75 millimeter. Actually, the photo is of a heap of a builder's sand, which is used for construction of buildings, and that is the sand you will know easily. You can recollect easily as the sand particle. They have large pores. They improve aeration because the pores are big. Air it gets in, and good drainage. Same because the pores are big. Then we have silt. Silt particles are the next in size, which has got 0.002 to 0.6 millimeter. They are intermediate particle size compared to sand and clay on the other end. Sand we already knew. The smaller pores are there, but they are more in number per unit volume. Compared to the sand, the pores are smaller in size, but more in number per unit volume of the soil in silt. Lesser drainage compared to sand, and more drainage compared to clay. So this is somewhere in between sand, silt, and now clay. Clay is actually the stuff for which pots are made. Actually, that's why this particular photograph is chosen, where a potter is working with his legs. He is actually making a duff, like we make atta duff for chapatis. A duff of the clay. Here the particles are smallest of the lot. They are less than 0.002 millimeter in size, and they consist of microscopic particles and smallest pores of the three sand, silt and clay. They have the smallest pores. Practically they disallow drainage because the pores are not large enough and they are so closely bound. the particles can stick together to form a gluey structure when it is wet. That's exactly what the photograph is. It's a gluey structure when it is wet. Here, very small pores retain water for longer duration. That's because they don't allow drainage to happen. So these pores, whatever water is inside the pores, it will stay for a longer time. That's why clay soil or clay has a longer moisture retention duration, and the least one of the duration is in sand, and silt is in the medium. These are the three major textural components in a soil. Now we have a loam. Many people understand easily. Loamy soil. Loam is a mixture of all the three: sand, silt, and clay. It's a mixture. Depending upon which of this component is highest in proportion, they get their name. Based on which of the three is the highest in the mix, the soil gets its textural name. Sandy loam, more sand. Silty loam, more silt. Clay loam, more clay. This illustrates the dominant proportion of the component in it. Similarly, loam also has a mix of the properties of all the three, proportional to the fraction, the percentage of the component. Whether it is, if there is more sand, then it will have more sandy properties. If it is more clay, it will have more clay properties, including water holding capacity, drainage. Now, how the soil texture affects soil moisture? That is the first part of the relationship. Clay, it has a densely packed particles. We already found that. Have little space for water or air. Water is absorbed very slowly, and runoff can occur if water is applied too quickly, because the absorption rate is very slow. So if your application rate is high, then you get runoff. Water before going down into the clay soil, it will spread and move away from the place of application. That's what runoff is. Clay soil will hold water very well, but once the water enters, it holds there for a longer duration, or the retention duration is high and can stay for several days, stay wet for several days. Then sandy soil, it's very loose, has a plenty of space for water and air. Water is absorbed very quickly, and runoff usually doesn't occur, because before runoff comes, all the water which is being poured into the sand will get inside into the profile, so there is very little chance for runoff. In other words, the percolation rate is much faster and probably more than the application rate. When wet, water tends to move straight down through the soil, and sandy soil does not hold water. Because of this, it cannot hold much water, as well as it cannot have longer holding duration and can dry out very quickly. That's why sandy soil dries out very quickly. We have a loam. Drip irrigation system has an ideal state in between mix of clay and sandy soil. If you have these two, its absorption rate is greater than that of clay, but not as fast as sandy soil. And loam soil will hold water well and dry out at a medium rate. It also dries out, but not as fast as a sandy soil, or not as slow as a clay soil. Now we come to understand, please understand, I am discussing the first part, soil and water. I'll come to the crop later. How water is held in the soil, that is our next issue. After learning about the different particles and different components, structural components of soil. Gravitational water. A soil sample saturates with water. When left to drain the excess water by gravity, gravity holds on to a certain amount of water. That means you have a soil sample, you are pouring water in it. The more you pour, the more water enters the soil, but it drains off. It moves away from the soil also. But after all that happens, there will be a certain amount of water held in the soil. and this is held by the gravity, and this is called gravitational water. The volume of water that could easily drain off is termed as gravitational water, and the water which is not available, and unfortunately what happens, this drainage happens because of the gravity, the force which is pulling the water down, and the more of it happens, the lesser water will be available in the soil for crops to take. And gravitational water generally is not available to crops because it moves away from the root zone. The water is not available for plant use because it drains off rapidly. As you apply, it goes off. So it's not going to be held there for the crops to take. That's the gravitational water. In other words, movement of water in the soil column away from the root system by gravitational force. That's what it is. Next is the capillary water. This is the water content retained in the soil after the gravitational water has drained off. This is the balance. After the draining off takes place, there is some water held in the soil, and that is also held by a force, capillary force. In fact, capillary force is the only force which is in this case opposing the gravitational movement of water. So soil can hold some water because of the capillaries. This water is held in the soil by surface tension, which most of you would have done very basic experiments, putting a open glass tube in a test tube of water and seeing the water suddenly jumping at a higher level inside the tube. This is because of the surface tension. Plant roots gradually absorb the capillary water and thus constitute the principal source of water for plant growth. This is the water which is held against gravity, that is, it cannot be drained by gravity, but it is held in the soil by capillaries. It will be available to the crops, and this is probably the only part of water which the crop can take from the soil. Then we have another very small condom of water, a type called hygroscopic water. This is the water when you take an oven dry sample of a soil, that means absolutely no water in it, and exposed to simply moist air, don't add water, moist air, that dry soil particles will absorb certain amount of moisture from the moisture, means wetness, from the moist air. And that's because the soil particle itself, the body of the soil itself, can hold some minor amounts of water, and that is called hygroscopic water. Hygroscopic water is always there in the soil particles, but when I mention this of drying sample and taking it to make you understand what it is, the hygroscopic water, and how it is different from gravitational water and capillary water. It is held as a very thin film over the surface of the soil particles, and it is under tremendous negative pressure, and because of this it's not available to the crops. Those films are not available to the crop. Now the same thing, this jar or a cylinder has been there, all our basic presentations on drip irrigation during my early years in Jain's, for training engineers, training agronomists, and training visitors, farmers, and all that, to show how the three levels of water are split. The split is actually a figurative term. Water is existing as one volume. You have the maximum at the when the soil gets the whole drum is a soil column. Soil gets a saturation of water. The gravitational water simply goes down because the gravity as a drainage, it is not available to crop. And the stage will come, there's no more drainage can happen, and that level, that point is called the field capacity of the soil. And at the field capacity, you have both the available water held by plant available water held by capillaries and some amount of hygroscopic water. But plant available water basically is held by capillary force. We learned that actually. So from field capacity to PWP, PWP is the permanent wilting point of the soil. When the plants are growing in them wilts, they don't get any more water from the soil. So that range is the available water. And then there is this hygroscopic or what you call matrix water, which is not at all available. It's very difficult to measure also in the soil, but we don't have to worry about it. what drip irrigation does in this. That's what I want to tell you. That is when then this figure becomes useful to you. Drip irrigation is a method by which, if you are estimating the water requirement of the crop, for the location, for the time, the climate, etc. is correctly, it is a method where only the available component of the three is applied to the soil, which is the crop water requirement. So now I connected them with what does the drip does. When drip irrigation is properly designed and the irrigation scheduling is properly estimated, what we are trying to do is, we are trying to apply every day basis or every 2-day basis, whatever it is, the amount of water required for the crop. And that, because the crop can take only in the available fraction of the total soil water, that should be more or less equivalent to the available water. Now, this knowledge was available even before drip irrigation as a technology was introduced. This is basic soil physics. At that time, because we don't have a technology to isolate only the available water fraction and apply, what everybody did was apply in excess, let the gravitational water go by drainage out, and the plant will take available water. That was the thing. That is because of technological limitation, not knowledge limitation. We didn't have a mechanism of applying limited quantity of water. That is the beauty about drip irrigation system when you think about the science of dripping or science of estimating water requirement and using drip system to apply that. We are applying the available fraction of the soil water. It varies in a clay soil to a sandy soil to a loamy soil. It varies. But because we are using evaporation of that location, the variation in these things will be integrated into the variation of the evaporation also. So based on evaporation, when you are estimating the water requirement, you are always estimating only the available water for that particular soil. That is the reason why we keep on saying, agronomists keep on saying, once you have the evapotranspiration estimated correctly, then you don't have to worry about the type of soil, you don't have to worry about the climate of the place, because all that is integrated into the estimate. You will come to know, you will come to learn about it more as I progress. So the point I'm making here, though soil has got three major components of water influenced by three major pressures or forces acting on it, only the capillary maintained available water in the soil, which is not being drained, not being dried up faster, is available to the crop. The crop can take only that water, and that water during our estimation of crop water requirement using evapotranspiration data will be the same. And this knowledge, even though existed years back, we did not have a methodology to apply only the available water. With the advent of drip irrigation theory and then the material and the entire assemblage of the system, now we have a practical applied technology to apply only the available water to the soil. And all these water savings we are talking about is while using drip irrigation. When you irrigate, you get 40%, 50%, 60% water saving compared to flooding, etc., is because of this. You are avoiding the main component of gravitational water from applying. You don't apply that. I hope this is clear to you. That is why in a soil moisture state, now we are talking about a steady state soil moisture of several days, you get the pink color graph when you do drip irrigation versus the blue colored graph, which you see very high water, 25% soil moisture content, coming to 5%, moving again to 26, going down to 5, cyclical. This happens when you do flood irrigation, because what happens is that you apply large volume of water, soil doesn't take it, so it then goes to a very straight down a drying pattern. This does not happen in drip irrigation, because first you are irrigating every day and you are irrigating only the available component or the plant evapotranspiration equivalent, so it maintains the wetness. It will not go to the extremes of excess and extreme drying. Because it doesn't go in the drip irrigation, plants get a uniform water steady state throughout its life if properly planned and designed and estimated drip irrigation is practiced. They obviously grow well, the growth will be better, yield will be better. That is the reason why drip irrigated crops alone, I'm not talking about fertigation here, drip irrigated crops alone out yields flood irrigated crop. Very simple, that's the basic. Here you have a steady state of moisture maintenance in the soil, no excess, because we saw in potato case, excess will reduce yield. Just like extreme dryness will also reduce yield. Both these are removed and soil is maintained with a steady state of optimum, I won't say maximum, optimum moisture, which is equivalent to the crop's need. So no wonder the crop is growing better. It doesn't go through the cyclic stresses of excess water, stresses of drying. Now I come back to talk about water in the soil, water in the atmosphere, and water in the plant. We try to look at, all this time we have been looking at water as a voluminous component, certain volume or a weight, certain weight of the system. Suppose you take a wet soil, weight, you dry it in a drought oven, you get the dry weight and you find the difference, wet weight minus dry weight, that is the weight of the water. You can also do this by adding water to a dry soil. You add 1 mm water, you add 2 mm water, you get a voluminous quantity. Mm multiplied by the surface area to which you are irrigating will give you the volume. 2 liters, 5 liters, like that. So we are looking at always that scenario. Now, I'm trying to tell you this, what I'm trying to tell you now is not anything new. This is a science which has been there from the 1960s. As we go down, I will also come to the scientific way of who found out, who introduced this scheme, etc. Actually, it is introduced in 1960 actually. It's been there parallelly, and many people who did research in those years, which happened to, I also happened to be there on plant water relations, went through and studied these things. That's the difference. The water content, let us take the water content of a leaf at any one time. Of a growing leaf, or a growth has stopped as a mature leaf, let us say, in a crop, in a plant. The rate of water uptake and the rate of water escape, which is transpiration or evaporation from the plant, is called transpiration from the leaf. So these two will decide the rate of uptake as well as the rate of escape or transpiration, decides the water content of the leaf. Which, just to put a mathematical equation, is the MCW minus ACW is the water deficit. MCW is the maximum water content the leaf can have, and ACW is the actual water content when you measure it. From the maximum, the actual will be always lower than the maximum because of evaporation being a continuous process. Leaf is only a conduit or a transit station for the water to be there and then before moving to the atmosphere. So ACW will be lower than MCW, and the difference between MCW and ACW, that is the maximum water content and the actual water content, decides the water deficit in the leaf. Leaf I have taken as an example for the plant, water deficit of the plant, or in a large community of plants, water deficit of the crop. Okay, that's the first thing to understand. This can be done in a slightly different way, which also has happened prior to 60s. Another measure that express water state. This is called the water state of the leaf, or water state of the crop, water state of the plant. Another measure that express water state is the leaf of the leaf, for example, is the relative water content. Relative water content, as the name shows, it's relative to something else. R is actually ACW divided by MCW, or what fraction of the actual water content is there when you are making observation to the maximum water content the leaf can have. So ACW divided by MCW is the relative water content. In fact, a lot of studies were done in the earlier, before thermodynamic concept was introduced, where plant water state is judged or measured in terms of R, the relative water content, anytime. For example, I will explain to you. In a normally irrigated crop, let us take a vegetable crop like a beans, where you can pull out the leaf. In the morning, what happens is that because the night before there is no transpiration, because there is no sunlight, transpiration requires energy, there is no sunlight at that time at night, the leaf will be more or less closer to MCW state, maximum, provided the soil is wet. Okay. As the day progresses, water evaporates from the leaf. Water also evaporates from the soil. Let's leave it that way. Water enters the crop roots to the stem, comes to the leaf. So that process will continue till a time by, that is the midday. It's called midday wilting also in some cases. Even if soil water is available, sometimes you will see plants wilt. Temporary or transient wilting takes place in the afternoons, because the evaporation rate suddenly shoots up because the temperature goes up. The sunlight comes to a peak, temperature goes up, and you have a higher evaporation, and even the uptake rate may not be able to match it. Then what will happen? The R becomes a low relative water content. ACW, the actual ACW will be much smaller than the MCW of the same leaf which we measured in the morning. So R comes less. By evening again, when the heat load becomes lesser and lesser, provided the soil maintains its water content, again the evaporation becomes lesser and lesser, and in the early evening when the sun just sets, and then maybe an hour later, you will see ACW slowly increasing because water sink has become less. Evaporation has become less and less and almost zero after darkness. ACW become closer to MCW. In other words, R become a higher figure. And what is the highest R you can get? You can get 1, but it's very unlikely. ACW and MCW becoming same. You can get 0.95, 0.96, you can get 0.9. These are all good R values. But the moment the R value of an average mesophytic crop, like our bean crop or like our rice crop, like our brinjal crop, tomato crop, etc., when the R comes down less than 0.6, that is 60% of the MCW is the ACW, the leaves will start wilting. That's what. So R is actually a term which can be measured and which will show you the plant's water state, but it changes with the temperature, it changes with the age of the leaf, it changes with any outside condition which will change the evaporation. Also, it changes with the supply of water in the soil. If the soil is totally dry, you don't have any problem because there is no R. Plants will be all wilted. There is no water content in the leaf. The plant will be dying, collapsing. Anyway, so the theory is understood now. This is not the thermodynamic concept. This is to make you understand water as a physical entity which has got either a volume or a weight unit. But the above terms, either the actual water content or the relative water content, these terms, they are not sensitive and they do not accurately indicate the water status when water deficit is not very severe. When it is very severe, it is understood. As I was mentioning, R can be 0.6, the leaves will be wilting. R can be 0.95, the leaf will look very normal and turgid. But for smaller changes in the water deficit, which usually we don't detect, but the crop detects first, this relative water content is not a good measure. That is where people started thinking, and a lot of parallel thinking happened in several places. And in 1960, a scientist called R.O. Slater, he worked in CSIRO, Australia. He introduced a comprehensive system to express the state of water in terms of not volume, not the weight, the free energy of the water. Very simple. Instead of measuring the water as a volume or measuring it as a weight, mass of the water, you measure the energy state of that water. This concept was there already in physics. That concept is borrowed and applied in biology. That's what they have done. It is the free energy difference between a given state of water and a reference state. And that reference state is always taken as free water at the same temperature. If you have the reference state water in the soil or in the crop, the free water, which is water in a water body, that's a free water, which is not restricted by any other thing like soil or plant tissue. That is the free water. We both are kept at the same temperature. Then you have the free energy would be the same for the same volume, same molecular volume of the water. That is the beauty about it. The free energy difference between a given state of water and a reference state. The energy state of the water is the one now, from now onwards, we are going to concentrate. And that is called water potential. And this Greek letter psi, 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 denotes that. It can be water in the leaf, water in the root, water in the stem, water in the soil. Everywhere, if at the same temperature, the same amount of physical water will have same water potential. That's what one has to understand. So here, what happens is that when we were talking about soil water, we were talking about plant water, when we are talking about atmospheric moisture, that is the vapor, we were originally using different units, different concepts, different way of looking at it. But now, when it comes to the nature, where a crop is standing in a soil and which supplies water passes through the plant crop and it escapes to the atmosphere as a gas. Actually, transpiration occurs in the gaseous stage. What is happening is this: all these three states of water, soil state, plant state, and atmospheric state, are now integrated when we talk about free energy. That's what it is done. What's the water potential? Water potential of leaf, water potential of stem, water potential of the plant, water potential of the soil, water potential of the atmosphere. Here, there is a slight difference. The water, because it is coming the vapor stage, and that's why the gaseous laws are applied, which are a bit complicated. I won't go into that level. That also is the same temperature and pressure. You get the same water potential in all the three phases. The thermodynamic concept of soil, plant, water, we are continuing that. Now, what I just said above is this. Thus, psi, which is the water potential, is equal to UW minus UWO divided by VW. What are these UW, VW, and UWO? UW is the chemical potential of the system with a number of molecules of water. That is the actual. When temperature, pressure, and the number of molecules of water, all other components are constant. That's the chemical potential. All this time we are either talking about the content of water, or the volume of the water, or the weight of the water. Here now we are talking about the chemical potential of that water. That's all. That's the only difference. Minus UWO, which is the chemical potential of pure water. Just like the MCW, maximum water, the pure water. Chemical water potential of the pure water at the reference same temperature and pressure, and it is usually taken as 0. In a perfect fully water body, water potential is taken as 0. I'll explain as it comes in. And the VW, the denominator factor, is a partial molar volume of water. That it is not the volume, it is the molecular volume of the water. Actually, water molecules combined collectively. That is the idea. You don't have to worry about the equation. You can keep studying this physical equation and keep generating questions and all that. Leave it. Here, the plant cell. Now, this is the most important thing. One can easily understand water inside the soil. Similarly, moisture, vapor in the air. But what happens to the plant? Where the water goes and how is the water being becoming a dynamic thing in the crop? This is more important. That's why it's called thermodynamic concept. The plant cell is treated in this. The assumption is like an ideal osmometer, comprising an elastic cell wall. The plant cell. Plant cell has when you increase the pressure inside. And a single permeable membrane is there. Inside the plant cell wall, there is a membrane, cell membrane. You see, animal cells don't have wall, they also have a membrane. Plant cells have a membrane and a cell wall. That's the difference. The cell membrane plus a thin layer of cytoplasm will be there all around inside. That acts as the dividing wall from the source of water to the sink of water. Now, where is the sink? The vacuole contained in the aqueous solution. That is how a normal, fully mature cell, which is not mechanized cell, like the bark of a tree. Normal, mature cell, I would say, containing an aqueous solution. The parenchyma cells are ideal osmometers. In the plant tissue study, you will see aerenchyma, air containing cells, air cavity containing cells, parenchyma, normal cells, only nucleus, cytoplasm, cell wall. That's the parenchyma cell. Then young cells called the meristem cells, which divides. For tissue culture, for example, we use meristem cells. So this is a cell with a wall and an internal membrane and a layer of cytoplasm all around and a vacuole containing water solution, which is aqueous solution. That's a typical osmometer concept. Osmometer. That is how in this concept of thermodynamic concept, this is considered. And hence, water is actually connected from one cell to the other, just like the cells are connected. And thus, in a tissue containing many cells, you will get a water continuum. This is very important. Now we are talking about how the water is conducted in the plant tissue from the roots to the leaf. So you have to understand this very clearly. These tissues function as the sink, either as the sink of the water, which means when it from the soil through the roots is supplied, these are the sinks. These are the places the water comes in there. The water potential system treats water in the soil, plant and the atmosphere as part of a continuous system. Now please understand for 1 minute. Let us visualize this thing. You have a soil with certain amount of water, not surplus water standing above. I'm talking about the soil containing water. Into that there is a crop. It can be a tree or it can be a tomato plant, which has got a root system and a stem and number of leaves exposed to the atmosphere. Now, as the water enters the roots, they move to towards the end. I will talk about that also, water conduction inside the plant tissue. You please visualize it. Through the roots, water is absorbed by the root hairs, pass through the root xylem, moves to the stem and moves to the leaf, and from the leaf through the stomates, they transpire, they escape from the thing. So basically the whole plant system is a conduit. It's a closed tube. Water moves from the bottom to the top. Now what is the force which makes the water to move like that? If you put a pipe, just bury a pipe half in the soil and other half exposed to sun, water doesn't move on its own, even if the soil has got water. If the soil has got surplus water also, it doesn't move up because it is held by gravity. You need a force. You need a pressure to negate the gravity force and have excess pressure so that the water will move out. Now in the plant system, you don't see any such pressure acting on your jackfruit tree or mango tree or tomato plant or a bean plant, but it is there. There's water potential, that's it. can describe the energy state of water in the system where it exists either as a liquid or vapor. As water changes from liquid phase to vapor phase, where does it happen? When the evaporation phase happens. Water is moved from the liquid phase to vapor phase. At a given temperature, the chemical potential will be the same and it will be at equilibrium. That's interesting. A certain volume, molar volume of water moves from the liquid to the vapor stage, its potential will remain the same. And I hope by now you have understood the continuity and also the conduiting of water through the plant system. We continue on this. This concept of free energy thus explains the water relations of plants. This is exactly what should have been taught in the beginning and could be applied to water absorption from the soil, water movement through the plant, and water escape as vapor from the plant. Three things: water absorption from the soil, water movement through the plant, and water escape from the plant. These are all a continuous process, and the free energy concept explains this very well. The water in the plant tissue is held by two main forces. How water is held in the tissue? The one is the solute potential. We already mentioned this, I already indicated in the last slide. The osmometer, how water is held in an osmometer. The same thing applies to a plant cell or a plant tissue. Many cells constitute a tissue. The solute potential and the pressure potential, which their terms are psi S and psi P. And a minor force of metric potential. Matrix is the matrix, the material with which the cells are made of. The cell wall is made of, the cells are made of. That's what metric potential. So we have psi, the total water potential of the plant or leaf or root or stem, is a sum of solute potential, pressure potential, and metric potential. I just pause here so that people understand this concept so far. Now we understood the energy state of water is termed water potential, whether it is in the soil or in the plant or even in the atmosphere. The plant water potential is an algebraic sum. Now a little bit of complication I'm introducing. It's not a sum, it's an algebraic sum. I hope all the people, engineers especially, who have done modern mathematics would understand what it means. Algebraic sum of solute potential, pressure potential, and metric potential. When it is said the algebraic sum, there is a signage, a sign is there. Is it positive or negative? That's what it is. Water potential generally is always less than 0. So because it is less than 0, it is always negative. There's another reason why it is negative. Because the components, if you take, one is the solute potential. This is because the aqueous solution in the vacuole in the cell also contains salt, ionic stage of salt, anions and cations, plus ions and minus ions, like potassium, sodium, calcium, magnesium. These are a plus. Then you have chlorides, bicarbonates, oleates, citrates, both the organic and non-organic actually negative ions. So you have this combination. Because water is available, they are in the ionic stage and they are balanced. That is why there is no electricity coming out of them. No electrons coming out of them. But these solutes in the water will actually reduce the water potential. In other words, very simple. The more salt you take in a food or salt per se, the more water you drink. Salt is the solute and water is of course water, which will reduce the effect of salt or the ionic volume of the salt related to the total volume of water. So in a cell, when you have many solutes, that's why we are fertilizing the crop. Solutes are always there. They have to be there. When you have a lot of solutes, and the more the amount of solute comes, the lesser the water free energy comes. Because the solute takes the component higher and higher. Because of this, the solute potential is a negative component. More solute means very low potential. very negative potential. I didn't say very low, very negative potential. Then the second one is the pressure potential, which is very simple to understand. In a cell, if you fill the cell, the entire cell volume is full with the vacuum, is full with the liquid. That liquid will in turn will apply a pressure onto the cell wall, like the tissue will collectively apply a pressure. That is why the leaves are looking turgid when it is well watered, because the pressure, which is from internal pressure, makes the cell to become turgid, and then they remain turgid till water is excessively lost. So this is called the pressure potential. The pressure is by virtue of the liquid, which is water plus solutes in it. Then we have a minor component, which is the matrix potential. The word comes from the matrix of the cell material inside this. That will also have a minor amount of reduction of water potential, or the need for water solution. So all the three, you have three components. Solute component, it's a minus, negative component. Pressure potential is always positive or zero. You can have no pressure when the leaf completely wilts. The pressure potential can be zero or close to zero. While the moment water enters, it increases. So it is a positive, it is a plus. And matrix component, just like solute potential, is a negative. So you have two negatives and one plus. So your result mathematically, arithmetically also, the psi will be a minus, a negative. Psi can be zero very rarely, because the atmosphere doesn't allow that to happen in a plant tissue. You will come to know on the practical side. Of this, metric potential is generally ignored in estimates and in calculations, because it is a very minor component, and it doesn't cause much variation in the total water potential in the psi plant or psi leaf. For changes in the water content, small changes in the water content, psi-m does not create change for the psi. So that psi-m is usually in estimates ignored. So the two major components are solute potential and pressure potential, which will, the algebraic sum of which is the water potential, and water potential is the free energy state of the water. I hope you understood all that. Now you have to understand the units for this. For any physical measurement, you need units. Length, you need inches or a foot or a meter. Like area, you need a meter square, like that. Water potential and its components are expressed in two ways. It can be expressed. One, because they are free energy, they can be expressed as energy per unit mass, which is joules per kilogram, or in pressure units, dynes per square centimeter. We are more, probably most of the engineers are more familiar with this, or bar. And we usually use, the practitioners of this for research purpose, we use megapascal, which is actually higher unit. 1 megapascal is actually equivalent to 10 bar. Now I'll explain this in a very simple way. Normally, without knowing this concept, people started using several equipments for measuring soil water status. And one of them is their tensiometer. By the way, the word tension is actually pressure. What you are actually measuring is the pressure difference happening in the soil, or tension difference happening in the soil when water amount changes. And you are measuring it as either 1 bar, 2 bar, or minus 15 bar. Minus 15 bar is somehow, even though it doesn't have much of a scientific basis, it has been taken by many researchers as well as practitioners, engineers, as a time when the second irrigation has to be given. Minus 15 bar, which is equal to 1.5 megapascal. I hope now you have understood the concept. The water potential system treats water in the soil, in the plant and the atmosphere as part of one continuous system. That's the whole thing I was trying to tell you in the last 45 minutes or so. As water changes from the liquid phase to vapor phase at a given temperature, the chemical potential will remain the same at the equilibrium stage. This is what one has to understand. In the soil plant atmosphere continuum, there is a continuous flow of water. Now we are actually talking about how the plant is going to take water. With the viewing this through the current principle of thermodynamics, which I explained to you. In the soil plant atmosphere continuum, there is a continuous flow of water from the source, which is taken as the soil. The soil is the source. To the sink end. The sink end is the atmosphere. Through the leaf, it goes to the atmosphere. At dawn, the internal gradient of water potential. Obviously, the movement of water happens. I told you some pressure is required. Like a pump takes water from the borewell. That is the gradient of the water potential itself. Provides that movement. Provides the energy for the movement. Or the pressure for the movement. At dawn, the internal gradient of water potential is eliminated because throughout the night there is no escape from the leaf to the atmosphere. No transpiration takes place because it requires energy and sunlight. Sunlight provides the energy. The heat provides the energy. By overnight equilibration, what will happen? That soil, the water potential of the soil and water potential of the plant will be in equilibrium. No movement. Early morning. They are in equilibrium. There is no gradient. So there is no movement. There is no uptake. Then what happens? Evaporation from the leaves begin once sun rises. And the leaf, the leaf which is the first part exposed, become negative, negative and more negative. I give you an example. The psi may be at 0.5, 0.1 megapascal. It may have become by now, after the sun rises and 1 or 2 hours into this, 0.5 megapascal or 0.6 megapascal, like that it has become. Which means there is shortage of water. The free energy of the water inside the leaves are becoming less and less or more and more negative. A gradient is established. The soil still has water. So a gradient is established. Water starts moving up. Evaporation of the leaves begins once sun rises and the leaf becomes more negative. But interestingly, more negative leaf, water potential of the leaf, does not mean water stress in the plant. Please understand. Because soil is, the moment there is a gradient established, water starts moving from the soil. Water stress comes only when the sink, that is the supplier, the soil, will also run short of water. That is the thing. So that every day, don't expect the plant going through a stress. As long as you are maintaining the water state of the soil. And that is what drip irrigation does. Again, I'm connecting them with that. Because drip irrigation you are applying every day, this is exactly why we are saying you have to apply measured quantity or the estimated quantity of water as per the evapotranspiration every day. Because the soil must be ready with that water. The moment the gradient happens, the plants are not stressed because the movement will start. But it still does not induce water stress. Just because the leaf water potential has become more negative. Water stress occurs only when the rapid flux of water to the atmosphere is coupled with the low water conductivity from the soil. Low water conductivity from the soil is the trigger for water stress to happen. In a time when atmosphere continues to suck air, water vapor from the tissue. In other words, what evaporation transpiration continue to happen from the leaves. As long as the soil can provide water, along with that amount of water lost from the leaf, there is no water stress in the plant. I hope I also try, along with this thermodynamics, I try to explain to you one critical factor about drip irrigation. And why we are insisting drip irrigation should be applied every day. Some of you may not have thought in this way, that's why I'm stressing it. Okay, I hope we have done that thermodynamics part. Now let us apply this as and when at each stage. The one is the uptake of water by plants. Now this is exactly what the last slide I hinted. When the evaporation takes place, leaf water potential become more negative. The gradient of potential is established. Water will move from the soil as long as there is water in the soil through the system and no water stress happens. A plant's root system must provide a negative tension to extract soil. Now let us take the plant itself into bit by bit. Now the figure here, what I have shown, you would have seen this picture many times, even in my slides which I happened to prepare long back. long back, when some 20 years back, to make people understand about the basics about plant water relations. You have the soil particle and the water. You see the depth of the width of that water is actually to show that is the maximum water after drainage the soil can hold, and that width is showing the field capacity. If that width become narrow and narrow and air moves up, the air is there in the center, the air bubble or air cavity moves up, the soil become drier and drier. Soil water potential also become more and more negative. It becomes more and more negative. So what happens is that you have the water potential of the root system and you have the water potential of the soil. When the root system water potential, the root water potential becomes more negative than the water potential of the soil, water from the soil will move to the root. And the side root must be always lower than the soil, then only water will move. Now, the process continues throughout the day. At the wilting point, plants wilt when you don't give water into the soil, or you cut down drip system for a number of days. Plants wilt. How did it happen? At the wilting point, the maximum negative water potential a plant can provide is balanced by the soil water potential. But if the soil water potential is not enough, or there is less water, or it is more negative, no water can move from the soil to the plant. So the plant will wilt. At wilting point, plant can no longer extract water. That's what it is. At the wilting point, plant can no longer extract water from the soil, and it will be permanently water stressed. That is why the thermodynamic concept now explain to you a physical phenomenon which you experience when you grow a crop in a declining soil water. The plants will ultimately wilt. So that's about the soil and water. Now we are talking about what happens to the water inside the plant system, or how it affects plant growth. During the life cycle of a plant, water, among other essential elements like air, fertilizer, etc., plays a vital role. Water maintains, first of all, turgidity of the cell. The cells become in a non-wilted, turgid state, and that is because the pressure potential is applying the pressure to the cell walls, the SIP, because water is available in the plant. Please understand. You have a system here. When all the cells are turgid, that is the maximum water at the water potential it can satisfy with the existing water. Then the plant will stand erect. Especially in herbaceous plants like tomatoes, brinjal, and all, see that you will see that brinjal is one classic case. Another classic case is a very sturdy plant, but it does very well. Guava plant, very fibrous stem system, but the moment water is short, you will suddenly see the leaves collapsing. They wilted few days, you didn't notice it, and few more days they were in the same water stress, they collapsed. They are on along. Water plants are not erect like a brinjal or a tomato or a chili plant or your rosimum plant in front of your house. Water accounts for the largest part of the body weight of an actively growing plant. Very important. See the plant weight, what you call. That is why when you are drying a vegetable, you are losing a lot of water and the weight comes to about 30-35%. I mean, I'm just giving an average. Almost 65% is water there. All those people who are drying different vegetables and fruits, they would know that. Sometimes up to 85% is the body weight of young plants, and about 50% of the mature plants is water only. What does the water give chemically to the plant? It gives an oxygen and a hydrogen required for the carbohydrate synthesis. In the photosynthesis process, there is a state where energy has to be released inside the chlorophyll containing cell, so that photosynthesis actually takes place. I'm not going much deep into the science of it. If anyone requires it, I can take another class for that. Not with this time. What happens? A molecule of water is split. What happens when a molecule of water is split? You get an O and two atoms of hydrogen. A lot of energy is being released by that splitting of the water. It is called hydrolysis. Photolysis of water. This happens because sunlight is the energy provider for that process. It's called photolysis of water. But that is a very small amount of actual water use when you talk about the huge amount of water which is being transpired by the crop. Please understand that. So water stress actually affects both. First, it affects the evaporation rate and the plant health, the plant turgidity, plant standing erect and all that. Then it affects the photosynthesis also, the plant. Okay, so there is a small amount of water being used, and this photolysis of water will help in the next chemical stage of the carbon absorption and carbohydrate formation. That's what it is. That's the only place where water molecule is actually split to use for carbohydrate synthesis. Called photolysis because it is happen. This lysis means splitting. It happens with the help of sunlight, photo. Okay, leave it out. Then water acts as a solvent for many of the plant nutrients. Plant nutrients have to move from the root system where they are absorbed to the different parts of the plant and to the leaf eventually. So this movement happens because of water carries them. So uptake of nutrients and transport, water is required. Similarly, green parts will start producing, not only leaf, all green parts will start producing, synthesizing photosynthetic glucose, sucrose. That has to be brought back to a storage organ, and also it has to be distributed to the other parts of the plant for their growth. Part of the thing synthesized is used by respiration. That's energy is used. Then only the plant will grow first of all. So you get a balance. And that's balance. When it is a very highly positive balance, you get your grain yield or fruit yield. The food manufactured in green parts of a plant gets distributed throughout the plant body. Again, this also happens through the medium of water, solution in water. Then transpiration is the vital process in plants. It's not a wastage. It's a very important process, and it does at a maximum rate called the potential transpiration rate when water is available in adequate amount. If soil moisture is not sufficient, transpiration rate will get lesser and lesser, and it will seriously affect the growth of the plant and finally the yield of the crop. We all know that. Leaves get heated up. That's a problem. When there is lesser and lesser water available and leaves are not turgid, the heat load from the sun onto the leaf get heated up with solar radiation, and the water in the transpiration help in the transpiration cycle, or the water conducting from the root system through the stem to the leaf, actually helps in dissipating the heat which is already falling into the leaf by which uses water. Transpiration of course uses water. So these are the way water in the plant growth, it conducts nutrients, takes nutrient to the top, brings synthesized food to the different parts. It helps by photolysis the formation of carbohydrate. It helps in maintaining the rate of transpiration. Maintaining the rate of transpiration is important for growth. Many people consider transpiration as an evil, which just removes the water from the crop. If you stop transpiration, the plants doesn't grow. They don't grow. So it's required. It's a process which is required, which only transfers water from the liquid phase and provides the gradient for the water movement from the soil to the leaf and to the atmosphere. Now we look at some more aspect of soil character and plant water. Many people talk about a lot of things about this soil, this water, that water. What is the scientific basis for all this? That's what we're looking at. Soils display an enormous spatial heterogeneity at the aggregate or plot scale. One of the major difficulty when working with the soil It is not a homogeneous mix like your atta in a duff. It is heterogeneous. Variations in particles, variations in textural things, variation in the pore size, almost everything, and mineral variation also. In smaller areas and smaller volumes it happens. So it's highly heterogeneous. And because it is heterogeneous only, the variations over time becomes more prominent. And it cannot be even measured. You measure the soil test, you do soil test, estimate the potassium availability. After 3 months you go there, it's different. And also second sample you take from 15 meter away from the first one is different. Some of the structural heterogeneity is important for root system, but this is important. This heterogeneity is a requirement for root to function and for water and salt movement, and its loss or modification can have deleterious effects on plant root system. This is what happens by puddling rice and grinding during the puddling field for rice planting and continuous grinding of the soil for ages. Some of the fields have been ground and puddled for the last 90 years, 100 years, people say. Rice cultivation, this field started my great grandfather. Maybe 3 generations, 75 years average. Everybody is grinding. So what happens is that the heterogeneity of the soil is lost. It has become a cementy pulp. When it is dry, hard as that. No heterogeneity. Homogeneity is brought in, but homogeneity is not what supports the root growth. So heterogeneity is the need of crops to grow, not only from the point of mineral absorption, from the absorption point of water also. Currently, there is very little information on the spatial variability or temporal variation in the soil properties, because we don't measure the soil in the field, or we don't test the soil in the field as often as we would have. We don't even do it yearly. We never do it on a seasonal basis. That means before planting a crop and after harvesting the crop. We do it maybe once in 10 years, or once somebody asks you to do it. So the information about the spatial variability and temporal means time variability, that's what I said, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year variable, is very little. Now it is in that context we are now going to talk about water use efficiency, WE. It is the amount of water transpired related to the amount of water applied. Basically, that is what water use efficiency. It can also be under water productivity when it comes to the water used and converted crop dry matter into yield. Then it comes to water productivity. Okay. Basically, the ton of yield produced per meter cube water. We call it in a very simple terms. And this also depends on the soil factors. It's not only depending on the variety of the crop, the fertilizer you are putting, the way you are irrigating, how much you are irrigating, and how precisely you are irrigating, etc. It also depends upon soil factors, the heterogeneity of the soil. For example, high soil strength due to compaction. Suppose there is a field where overrun by tractor movement years together, and the compaction has set in, huge particles have become so close. Aeration is less. Porosity is also less. It will prevent plant roots from exploring the soil matrix. Even though that soil can be highly fertile, minerals are there. Your nitrogen, available nitrogen, your potash, your phosphate, everything can be there. But it is highly pressed, compressed, compacted. And so the roots cannot explore that matrix of the soil for water and nutrients. What is the point there? You can apply water, plants don't get it because the roots cannot explore. You apply nutrients, plants don't get it because roots cannot explore. So what happens to WE? Here, WE is not a function of the yield or the water you are applying or whatever things you do. It is not the response of the crop, because all that been hindered by the compaction. Just an example only. This is how the soil character impacts the plant water use. Not only plant water use in this case, it also plant fertilizer use, nutrient use. How water use efficiency is affected by soil? Say we can continue. The aeration status of the soil matrix also has an impact on plant uptake of water nutrient. We all know that actually. although there are many interactions controlling plant responses. These are not fully understood, but we know it is there. The aeration status is important for plant nutrient absorption, plant water absorption. So this is a factor which is beyond our control because we did not manage the soil. Historically, we did not manage the soil well. That is how. You may wonder why some farmers will keep calling you and say, sir, I applied 100 kg nitrogen, 50 kg potash, 180 kg potash, 100 kg nitrogen, 80 kg potash, and 50 kg phosphate. All that what you said, but I am not getting much benefit. If you really look at it, physically the soil is becoming totally unlivable for crops. The textural or the heterogeneity of the soil is lost. There are many cases like that. Okay, many plants, however, suffer physiological membrane damage because the selective or critical harmful solutes are there in the soil. That also is another aspect of the soil affecting the water use efficiency. The membrane damage happens, physiological damage happens to the crops. W is also diminished, reduced by the presence of spatially variable anaerobic conditions. In certain part of the soil, you get an anaerobic condition despite your soil is exposed, but your soil doesn't have air inside. And research is therefore needed to link our understanding of how soil hydraulic properties change during drying and irrigation management so that we minimize leaching even with the drip irrigation. See, this is a very interesting statement. Many of the scientists of the conventional type will argue with me. Hey, you are not talking anything new. You are talking about what we already know. You know it, but you don't have a solution for when this is occurring as a problem. That is why I am putting it here. We do not have the correct measurements done to link how the soil hydraulic properties are varying, and hydraulic properties are essential for crop water relations. That is why I'm even with the drip irrigation. That is why I stress this point, bringing it again and again. So sometimes farmers may cry to you saying that I applied whatever you said, but I didn't get any change in the yield. If you are really studying that field for a long time and understanding all this, then you may end up with some of these things. So please, when we are giving agronomy support to the farmers, we are doing with our sincerity, our knowledge, with as much as possible knowledge being transferred to the farmer. But even for us, sometimes we don't understand the field very well where he is growing the crop because there is very little measurements done on these things. Now, on the field capacity, what generally happens is that if you have a percentage of 25% water, 25% air, 49% the mineral content of the soil, and 1% is the organic carbon. This is what we would want it. In many places, you don't get the air because you will overwater. The 25% of the water becomes sometimes more than 80%, 90%, and air bubbles will come out, air will escape. You don't get anything high of production in such soils. Now, these are just to make what is the saturation water. This is the field capacity water, the excess water drained, and what you see the blue color in the second figure is the field capacity, which is available water, which is a capillary, it is held by capillary. And the last point is there is only air sacs, and all the interparticle spaces are occupied by air. In a funny way, you say garam hawa, no water, plants will die. Now here again, I'm not going to take, because this presentation I actually made for ICID for a teaching class to make engineers all over the world who are members of the ICID to understand about soil plant water relations and irrigation and crops response. So root depths, you know it actually, you have different depths, so, and that is the zone of soil these crops are exhausting minerals and water from. In terms of drip irrigation, we are better off because we are applying water from the surface or in the subsurface close to the root system, so that we make sure that the water doesn't, and along with the water, minerals also does not go beyond the absorbing volume of the soil, absorbing part of the roots actually in the soil, so that you get a maximum benefit. I just taken millet, groundnut, medium, and it's a deep sugar cane, for example. You have going up to 1 meter. Then you have maize, sorghum, cotton, very deep rooted plant, pigeon pea, another one. These are the different depths of the crop. Just go. Interestingly, here I have put this. This is also a very common picture which has been taken from a soil physics book, which has been with me for a long time, and many training programs utilized, just to show, because there is always a criticism while for the anti-drip system, anti-drip technology, people saying that water is actually being applied from the top and it evaporates. So what will happen to the roots below the ground, or that sort of thing they will ask. They even used to ask me, teak trees, when it is drip irrigated, they will fall off because the roots don't go deep enough to maintain them, without knowing that there are two types of roots. One is the anchor roots, the other is the absorption roots. All that stages are all past now. I'm just sharing experience of different types and different anti-drip people with their ideas, contacting us. And so this is one figure I always show. Is if you look at here, the total root rhizosphere is divided into 4 parts. D1, the first part, D by 4. Okay. And here 40% of the water extraction takes place in the first quarter, which means about 10, based on the crop. This is a model diagram. Based on the crop, can be 10 centimeter, 15 or 20 centimeter from the surface depth. Most of the water extraction takes place. That's where the drip is applying, because when it is applying from the top, then another 30% happens in the next quarter. So if you have about 70% water taken by the drip irrigation only extending up to the second quarter depth, well and good, the crop will grow excellent. Actually, there is no doubt that water need not go to the extent the roots go. Please understand, because the absorbing roots, or the maximum absorbing power roots, are towards the surface. This is the classic soil physics diagram. Again, the two types of soil, just to make you understand. The first one on the left side is this anti-soil, where you are applying a certain unit of water. It will move to the sides only about 15 centimeter from the point of dripping. Okay. So for example, our soil which we measured in Ramdal project, very rough and requires muram type of soil, is close to this. Only about 15 centimeter on either side you get the water spread. But in the meantime, if you apply a lot of water, this just goes down. Within 40 minutes, it reaches about 90 centimeter when there are no roots are available. So you have to restrict the irrigation and stop irrigating beyond 40 minutes. Do not irrigate. That's one lesson learned by the knowledge of soil physics. Then how do we irrigate for a row crop? You have to bring the drippers and the drip laterals closer. This is another topic which I will be talking about next week. Placement, alignment of lateral and drippers. Now you took on the right hand side, you have the clay soil, which has got with the same amount of water. It spreads much faster. It even spread to about 35 to 40 centimeter, actually 35 centimeter exactly on either side. The dark color you can see, and it moved by the time about 60 centimeter, which is probably ideal situation in that. So here you can have drip laterals at farther points. The distance can be more. The drippers to dripper spacing can be more. Anyway, this I will ask you to recollect in the next presentation also. You are all aware of this. I'm just going through this. Now the dripper to dripper placement is here. Wetting pattern of drippers. They will coalesce. Coalesce means one wetting bulb will join with the other to give a strip wetting. That is how we are managing it. So based on the soil texture, this decision is taken, and fortunately over the years, seeing different types of soil and irrigating all different types of soil texture classes in India and elsewhere, it has become a practice for me to know the texture and then tell you what the dripper to dripper spacing. And many of my engineer colleagues know that. I give them the answers by listening to them, explaining to me about the soil and the soil texture, and also dripper lateral to lateral spacing. And to my and to their and to our collective relief, our choosing lateral spacing or dripper spacing has never failed a crop. And that's the beauty about the science. We apply science, thinking about it, we apply science, and we always win in this case. And I'm very happy that Jain Irrigation provides opportunities for that. This is a different type of low discharge dripper and a high discharge dripper. What will happen that anyway. Now this is the actual case. Whatever you saw is all drawing. This is the actual case. I have taken lots of pictures from this place in Rajamundry where a tobacco crop was being planted and our drip irrigation was there, and it helped a lot for actually studying about soil and the water movement and all that. The actual sand in a sandy loam, which means sand is more in this loam. That's the meaning of sandy loam. The wetting pattern comes, it's not actually a bulb as you see in the previous picture which is drawn theoretically, but this is the way it happens. You can very clearly see that how the moisture moves. This is a 4 LPH turbo dripper, our round dripper which we were using initially, and this picture itself is now about 15 years old. And what will happen in another part of the field, we were digging fiercely at different parts. The same amount of water has fallen, same amount of lateral movement also, probably more, but puddling happened. When we dug out and we found out that that place has got hard pan, you can see the dry, unwet part just below the wetting pattern. This is the dry. So these have to be broken by deep plowing, or what we call ripping, R-I-P-P-I-N-G, ripping, using a plow share which goes up to 40-45 centimeter and a heavy duty tractor. You can do that. Once in a while you have to do to break these things. Anyway, because this is very critical when you are doing drip irrigation. Otherwise what will happen is that the crops which are standing on this part of the thing, they will suffer from water shortage, even though the drippers are uniformly emitting water. Please understand this. And many people immediately will call the engineer, the dealer, and complain that, sir, your dripper is not working. Some places water is not coming, and some places I see water on the top. My crops are dying. It is not the dripper's problem. It is the problem he prepared the land. Please, my agronomist friends, this has to be understood very well. Sometimes you also join the farmers and you also take your complaint along with the farmer's complaint to the next level of the person in the company and say that, sir, our drippers have some problem. They are not emitting uniformly. They are emitting uniformly. The only thing is the water is not moving in the soil uniformly because your soil is not uniform. The heterogeneity which I mentioned a while ago is more. This is what we want to get, matching the wetting pattern and the root spread. We can do certain sometimes modifications of the soil texture. This is a classic example. This photograph I have taken from Nanda and Jain actually. But to prove a point, see, this is a very sandy soil. That is why they put a drip line for every row of the plant. It's a chili crop, early chili planted. But you see what was the dark black material there. What they have done is, in this case, the soil texture has to be modified if you want to get good moisture balance in the soil availability, or you have a steady state of moisture in the soil. They added organic manure. That manure added to the soil will hold the moisture and will reduce the impact of sandiness of the soil. That's the right way to say it. So that the performance of the drip irrigation system will be enhanced even though it is a sandy soil. This is a good lesson for people. So that is why we keep on saying in sugarcane, we keep on saying in rice, we keep on saying in wheat, in every crop, please add organic manure at the time of land preparation before planting. Not only for the carbon and the nitrogen ratio which maintains, and the other benefits you get from the organic matter, it also helps textural modification of the soil, making it better for the soil, plant, atmosphere, water continuum. This is the applied. These are some of the things we are applying in the field so that we are getting over those difficulties. Now the last part of my thing, we have absorbed water through the root. We even allowed some water to escape. We had to have transporting of the water, which is purely a Yeah, scientific theoretical topic for your information. I'm just giving it. First, look at the photograph, the one on the right hand side where you see a root. You can see a lot of our agronomists these days working in the banana and the tissue culture banana fields will be seeing these banana roots all the time. These roots, if you look closer, somewhere in the middle of their length, you will see a lot of hairy structure, which is the root hairs. And because these root hairs are the ones through which water enters. Now you come back to the top left hand side of the picture where there is a cross section of the root is given and one root hair is given, how the water enters through the root hair, absorbs. Please understand, root hair is not a cell. It is a part of an epidermis cell. You can see the first cell with an extension in the cross section. This cell acts like an osmometer in comparison to the water potential of the soil, so that when the water potential of that particular cell become more negative than the soil water potential around the root hair, water will enter into the gradient is established, water will enter into the cell. That water is then transported through the arrows, you can see, into what we call the conduction tube or the pipeline, the vertical pipeline of which the horizontal diagram is there, the xylem. So I understand that is how soil water is extracted or absorbed or uptake by the roots into the plant. First point to understand. Root hairs are not independent cells. Root hairs are an extension of the outer layer of the tissue. Each cell can have a root hair, or some cells don't have it, so some parts have it. It varies from plant to plant and crop to species to species. Forget about all that. You understand this? When the root hair containing cell, its water potential becomes more negative than the soil, water from the soil will move to because it's a continuum, it moves to that cell. From that cell to the next cell, next cell, finally it reaches the xylem, which is the vertical movement upwards. That's what we have seen here in the lower figure which I have shown, the bottom of the slide. You have the epidermis cell which has got the root hair, and then the cortex cell, the cells which coming in between that, and finally the pericycle and the xylem. When it comes to xylem, because it's a tunnel, it is actually a vertical conduit, just like your PVC pipe. It moves up. Why it is moving up? Against gravity. Please understand, gravity will pull down anything which trying to get up. That's how the Apple story and the Newton's finding we learned about gravity. But here what happens is that at the top of the xylem, where the water is exiting into the leaf, from the leaf it been sucked, it been converted into vapors and sucked by atmosphere. It's just imagine, from the soil, through the root hair, through the xylem, to the leaf cells, it is a continuous column of water. From the top is being sucked out by the atmosphere, because the air, because of the heat load onto the air and the wind movement of the air, for example, mainly the heat load, the aerial water potential of the air surrounding the leaf will be always more negative than the leaf water potential. Water will move out. That's the way the concept works. So you understand, that is how water can move up even in a long, tall 100 meter, 200 meter trees are there. Sequoia trees of California, the tallest trees in the world. Water is moving out, moving against gravity. They are not coming down. Imagine the amount of pull, the force which pulls the water up. Pull of transpiration. That's what it is. So that is how the entire thing. Now, if you look, there are two colors I have used. This very important thing to understand. In the last diagram, the one is the brown color, where it called the symplast. I have written. Symplast is the tissue insides, the cell insides, where the vacuole, everything is coming, osmometer. where water will move through cell to cell through the sap or the liquid part or the vacuum part, aqueous part. Then you have some water will also move through the walls, through the what we call the breaks in the cell wall. Those are actually also absorb water and move. That is called the apoplastic water. Anyway, I don't want you to get confused. Basically, try to understand that root hairs, through root hairs, water enters the roots because the root hair cells will have more negative water potential than the soil surrounding it. Similarly, water will move finally to the xylem, which is a pipeline inside the plant in the root, stem and leaf it reaches. Here, water is actually moving up against gravity because of the pull or the pressure or the force of the transpiration which sucks it out. You understood it probably very easily now. It's because the thermodynamic concept, after its application to the science of water movement in soil, water and air, made it very simple to understand. That is the reason. I have said water transport through vascular tissue. Vascular means both the xylem and phloem will come. In the xylem, it will be always moving up. You see on the right hand side diagram. In the phloem, where because water will bring back the synthesized food down, so you can have movements on both sides. It is easier to understand that actually, because the distribution of the food synthesized in the leaves to the different parts of the plant, especially to the storage organ. Suppose it's a tuber crop, it has to reach even to the root system for storage. So this happens through so that's the importance of water and water movement, and water movement happens against a gradient of water potential. That's all you have to remember. From point to point, there must be a gradient. From a less negative water potential to a more negative water potential zone, water will move. Now we understand what is the water need of the crop, because the water requirement has become a very much used term and many people don't understand it. Very simply saying, there are two things, need and want. I want a car, but I don't need a car. I am sitting at home in lockdown. What I can do with a car? But I want a car. Want is your wish. Need is actually what you actually require to move around. Very simply put it. Like this, the crop is very conservative. It has a water need, and that water need is equivalent to evapotranspiration, and that is what we are estimating and supplying through drip irrigation. That is equivalent to the available water content in the soil. There is no component of the gravitational water component which goes waste by drainage. The entire crop water requirement and the crop water relations, soil crop water relations, now you have understood in this one sentence. Weather variables such as climate affect the water need of the crops, and therefore the criterion of soil water availability for scheduling irrigation cannot be considered in isolation from the climate factors. Now I am bringing another component into this, the climate factors. The temperature, the wind speed, the wind, yes or no wind, the solar radiation, the direction of the wind, etc. Because pan evaporation is affected by all other variables. Many people ask me why you are using only pan evaporation for estimating water requirement. It's because their understanding about pan evaporation is of doubtful nature. That is right. Pan evaporation is measured on a open pan where all the other components that may affect water relations in the crop or soil or air is affecting the evaporation process there. If you have more sunlight, high temperature, more water will evaporate. If you have humidity and less movement of air, no wind, less water will evaporate. If you have wind, continuous mobility of air above the water surface, more water will evaporate. Night, low evaporation, no sunlight. Daytime, more evaporation, plenty of sunlight. You have a longer day, per day evaporation will be more. You have a longer dry day, potential evaporation will be more. Potential for evaporation is more, but it may not evaporate because there may not be any water. Please understand that's the difference between potential evaporation and the actual evaporation. For actual evaporation to take place, water should be there. In Rajasthan desert, you go to Churu or Nagaur and see or Bikaner. In those sand dunes, also potential evaporation is very high because the wind is there, very high heat load is there, open sun is there, everything is causing evaporation, but there is no evaporation because there is no water in that sand. That's what the difference is. Because pan evaporation is affected by all other weather variables, temperature, wind speed, solar radiation, day length, humidity, where the vapor pressure deficit is humidity. Pan evaporation is the comprehensive indicator of the crop water need. That is why we are using consistently pan evaporation to estimate the water requirement of the crop. That's a scientific basis. And hence it is taken to estimate the CWR, crop water requirement, and irrigation scheduling. These are so many people have doubt. Even ICAD wanted me to stress this point, and that's why I put so much detail. Please understand this presentation originally was, as I mentioned, to ICAD listeners who are all engineers and water technicians from all over the world. So some of the things which you are familiar to you also I went into explaining in detail because I did it for them. So some of you may have thought that I am boring. Fine, fantastic. You can stop listening. In this concept, the plants are considered as a simple aqueduct, pumping water retained in the soil and losing to the atmosphere. Now you look at the crop. Now you will look at the crop in a different perspective. I'm not even thinking about whether it's a living creature or not. Just imagine a plant standing in a soil, takes up water from the soil, transports to the top, atmosphere takes it away. So it is a aqueduct. It's merely an aqueduct. In a physics term, that is correct also. Pumping water retained in the soil and losing to the atmosphere. The process is growing because the turgidity of the water gives. It is growing because the water helps the movement of nutrients. Water helps synthesize food to reach the storage organs. And a very minor fraction, 0.001 fraction of the water, it uses chemically in photolysis in the process of carbohydrate synthesis. That's all it happens. But it is a conduit. And this conduit's concept became very clear only after this thermodynamic concept is introduced in the 60s. And in the 77, 80, the time I spent 3 years for my PhD research, this is the hot topic. So we all got into that area of research one way or other. And in my case, I did crop water relations, also nutrition, combined that, and then did an area of research. And that gives me at least the conviction and the strength to talk to you. Now we know this is why we use the pan evaporation, pan factor, because in the open pan, water is evaporating directly from the water surface. There is no restriction apart from the surface air. In the crop, it is to be through the leaf tissue. In the soil itself is a restriction. So pan evaporation measured will be always higher than the evapotranspiration taking place through the leaf. That's why we have a pan factor, which is 0.7, 0.75, because FAO has studied this across locations, different climates, and a crop factor, which explains the age factor of the crop, and which changes with the age, and the canopy factor changes with the size of the crop, how much it is shading the natural surface. Then effective rainfall efficiency of the system. You are all familiar with this. This is the pan evaporimeter. It has got a certain standard size is there. Please understand, any open vessel is not a pan evaporimeter. It has the standard where it should be kept, or etc. thing. And just for your information. And then this is the Kc. Kc changes with the age. Kc is the crop factor. Changes with the age. For example, I have put an example. Water requirement of potato. This is my own data, which we have estimated for, I think it is for Punjab. This photograph also, potato crop is for Punjab. Using this is why it is. In the first month, about 6,000 liter per acre is what you are every day the crop is using. But about the third month, it comes to 18,000 liters per acre. And then senescence starts, crop matures, it reduces to 14,000. Please understand this is possible only because we studied the evapotranspiration, we understood that, and we studied the irrigation. Had it been flood irrigation, there's nothing like this. Whether in the first month or in the last month, you apply the same volume of water to fill the ground. To fill the ground. Not even knowing whether potato likes it or not. That's the difference between the irrigation methods. This more and more of this have to be understood, and people have to be passionate about the water use for agriculture. And we do not have. And in fact, one of some data I read somewhere says that our country is the largest water waster. I'm sorry to say. I like everything good about India. I want India to be great. But this is a truth. We are the largest water wasters in the world. And irrigation, obviously, because we are using almost 78% of water for irrigation, that is a major venue for water wastage. Even for this potato, I am just trying to show you why evaporation is critical. The data of evaporation is critical. I have two locations here. One is Nilgiris with a low daily evaporation rate, 2.6 millimeter in August to 2.9 something in September, like that. That is the potato period, August to November. You have actually September to December. You have if you take the daily mean for 30 days and then average it, you get only about 2.6, 2.7 like that. Please understand. Dharmaburi, which is in the north of Tamil Nadu, bordering to very close to the Karnataka border, very drier place, but it's not a high altitude place, not like Nilgiris. On the same months, the evaporation is 8.8 to 6.5, almost 3 times. In both these places, identical potato variety is grown. I have collected data for that actually. The Ooty potatoes, called the famous Ooty potatoes, which we get in the market in Tamil Nadu, comes from Nilgiris. Potato is also grown in Dharmaburi, in our Dharmaburi precision farming project, which we did with the Tamil Nadu Agriculture University. There again, I estimated irrigation schedules for many farmers there. That is how I found out this huge difference when we put together and then think about it. In other words, if you plant a tomato in the month of August somewhere and use a pan factor the same and a crop factor, etc., 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 you are using something like 46,000 liter water for the entire month in sprinkler, and in drip actually that part is missing. It doesn't matter. What I'm trying to say is that the amount of water a variety of potato uses in Nilgiris for the first month to the last month, and first month to the last month, same variety of potato for the same growing time uses in Dharmaburi, there's a huge difference. Whether you use drip and sprinkler, it doesn't matter, because drip we use 0.9, 90% efficiency, sprinkler we use 60% efficiency. It's the same. So calculation is the same. Amount of water is different. The crop water requirement or the need for Nilgiris potato in August is much lower than the need for water volume in Dharmaburi, the same variety of potato. The only difference is because of the evaporation. That's the point I want to make. That is why pan evaporation, keep on asking. Give pan evaporation data, you get the most accurate plant water requirement, water need. Thank you very much. I hope you may have, some of you may have got a new perspective of looking at crop water relations and the role of water in soil, water in plant, water in atmosphere, how they are connected, and how drip irrigation could change the way we are even thinking about water application. And then some of you would have realized that how important this technology of drip irrigation is. It's not about putting laterals, PVC pipe, and all. That's also very important. We need the best systems to be on the ground. But equally important is the software part. How will you do the irrigation scheduling? With all this knowledge only, we are creating irrigation schedules for you for different crops wherever you are growing. In Jain Irrigation, we clearly use knowledge available in the world, to convert knowledge into technology steps. Thank you.
Water is life. We all need clean water to live, to grow crops, to thrive. But there just isn't enough water or land to feed our hungry world, unless we change the way we grow food. That's why millions of farmers are turning to Jain. Jain is totally integrated, totally innovative. Farmers helping farmers. The company logo reflects our holistic cycle of shared values. The sun, source of free renewable energy. Enhanced crops thanks to tissue culture plants and improved inputs. Water used sparingly and intelligently. The land protected and used wisely to deliver more. Jain has become a worldwide force in irrigation technology, the agri-value chain, and green energy solutions. Headquartered in Jalgaon, India, in just 2 generations, the company that started with 7,000 rupees has become a billion-dollar organization, the world leader in agro-technology. Jain starts with detailed 3D designs and provides the widest range of irrigation products and solutions. In this remote part of the world where there is no electricity, Jain's solar-powered pumps provide on-demand irrigation through a variety of Jain pipes to irrigate the roots of plants produced in Jain's own fields and greenhouses. We pioneered the use of drip tapes for row crops with the innovative Chapin tape. Thanks to our micro irrigation systems and close work with farmers, we help them grow better produce that sells for more. We have even created a breakthrough technique to grow rice with drip irrigation. The result, better yields and better quality. Israel is known for bringing advanced irrigation to the world, and Nandan Jain led the way with integral drip line and sprinklers. Jain, total integration, total technological innovation, whether you farm 1 or 100,000 acres. No one offers a greater variety of products than Jain. On 5 continents, Jain is transforming the lives of farmers. Millions of farmers, 10,500 associates, more than 1,000 agro specialists, 30 production plants, sales in 116 countries, 7,000 dealers and distributors, global leaders in micro irrigation, mangrove processing, tissue culture plantlets, pioneers in solar agri-pumping, producing 40,000 kilometers of drip tube every day, with annual revenues exceeding $1 billion and revenue growth of 1,400% in just 10 years. Why is Jain different? We are a global company that built our business on results, trust, constant innovation, and total integration. We are financially strong, enjoying steady, sustainable growth. We believe that you need to leave the world a better place than you found it. We believe in sustainability. We invest heavily in our people, our partners, and critically, our farmers. Food and energy security is tied to water security. But with today's technology, no one should ever go hungry. And every farmer, no matter how small or large, can produce more crop per drop. There is no need to fight wars over water, because if used wisely, we can make it last. Water is life, and at Jain, we are dedicated to improving life everywhere for everyone, now and in the future.